Take a look at this. Once upon a time, this was America's heartbeat, the millionaire's row of the 1800s. Now, it's just a graveyard for old industrial dreams. While you're elbowing your way through 400 other people for a shoebox apartment in Brooklyn, these river towns just sit there, quiet, practically waving you in. They're right on the water, empty and waiting, and nobody's talking about them. These aren't just towns that slowed down. Their economies didn't hit the brakes. They drove off a cliff in the 70s and never came back up. But now, in 2026, the tables have turned. Big cities are out here losing their minds over sky-high rent. But in these river towns, prices haven't just gone down, they've crashed. If you're looking for cheap rent, real homes you can actually afford, and a life that doesn't feel like a rat race, you're in the right place. Seriously, stick around. We dig up the hidden towns and overlooked neighborhoods where you can still get by without selling your soul. Don't wait around. Subscribe to American Life Explained, and let's find you a place that makes sense. Let's kick things off with Cairo, Illinois. This place sits where the Mississippi and Ohio rivers met, a little town that's seen everything. Back in the day, Cairo was buzzing. Boats, trains, factories, warehouses, you name it, it was here. People had jobs. The streets were full, and the town had a real pulse. But over the years, the factories shut down, shipping faded, and the jobs vanished. People moved away. Streets emptied out. Houses sat and crumbled. Now rent is dirt cheap. We're talking places that used to go for a few $100, now renting for next to nothing. Whole blocks are empty. But for the folks who stuck around, there's an odd sort of upside. You can actually live here sometimes for almost nothing, in a town packed with history and character. Sure, it's seen better days, but there's still life here. Artists are coming in, fixing up old buildings. A few cafes and shops have started popping up again. The riverfront's got some new projects, a quiet comeback, if you're paying attention. No, it's not the Cairo it once was. But it's no ghost town either. People look out for each other. There's volunteer work, keeping parks alive, community projects that keep old traditions going. The population's dropped, but the heart's still beating. If you're willing to swap a little convenience for serious savings, Cairo gives you a shot at living well on a tight budget. It's a real place, with culture, history, and a vibe you won't find in the big cities. And there's more than one way to make it work. Some people rent tiny apartments for pocket change. Others strike deals with homeowners, trade services for a place to stay, or join up with co-ops. Here, cheap living isn't just about luck, it's about people making the most out of what's left. There's something to learn from that while everyone's eyes are glued to higher-end cities. Cairo, Illinois quietly flips the script. Here, living well doesn't mean you need deep pockets. The pace is slower, crowds are rare, and honestly, the cost of living is so low, it almost feels like a secret. If you're tired of rent, eating your paycheck, Cairo isn't just a dot on the map, it's proof that life gets easier when opportunity shifts. For anyone willing to look past the obvious, the rewards are right there. Cheap homes, real community, and the freedom to shape a river town into your own place. Sure, some outsiders just see empty streets. Locals, they see wide open potential, just waiting for someone gutsy enough to show up. That's the real pull of these forgotten river towns. You get history, affordability, and, if you're willing, a shot at building something meaningful for almost nothing. Cairo's rent has tanked, life has slowed down, but communities here keep going quiet, lively, and always ready for anyone looking past the headlines. Then there's East Liverpool, Ohio. Once the pottery capital of the country, this river town buzzed with life's ceramics, factories, river trade, millions of pottery pieces shipped out every year. Back then, jobs were everywhere, streets were packed, rent was steady, and life just made sense. But when factories left and industries changed, East Liverpool hit the same wall as so many Midwest towns. Plants shuttered, shipping faded, workers moved away. With fewer people, rent crashed. Now, East Liverpool is one of the country's best-kept secrets when it comes to cheap living. Houses that once rented for a fortune now go for $200, sometimes $400 a month. Empty apartments, old row homes, even riverfront spots just waiting for somebody bold enough to make them theirs. But don't get the wrong idea, this place isn't dead. Little pockets of energy are coming back. Artists, retirees, remote workers, they're fixing up old buildings. Cafes and community centers are popping up. Walk down a brick street and you'll feel it. Life is still here, just quieter. Rent's low, but opportunity isn't gone. Here, people swap skills for rent, help each other out, and lean on tight neighborhood bonds. Small, close-knit groups offer support and purpose. Whether you're a family, retired, or just trying to escape the rent trap, East Liverpool delivers something rare. Cheap rent, historic streets, and a real sense of belonging, stuff big cities lost years ago. And here's the kicker. Some old neighborhoods have rent so cheap, you could almost live for free if you know where to look. This isn't just about running from expensive cities. It's about finding places where the cost of living crisis hasn't taken over everything. But, fair warning, life here isn't perfect. The roads might be rough, services can be spotty, and jobs are hard to find. Still, if you're willing to adapt, East Liverpool proves a point. When demand dries up, rent falls. But community can still thrive out of the spotlight. The town won't make the news, but it's quietly rewriting what affordable living means in America. Picture it: walking old streets for next to nothing, neighbors waving hello, and a sense that life really can be different, and the freedom to put your money toward living, not just paying rent. Most Americans don't even realize that's an option, but East Liverpool still offers it. The big idea here? Rent doesn't have to swallow your paycheck. Small towns, forgotten river communities, and neighborhoods where everyone knows your name, they're living proof. East Liverpool sits right on the Ohio River, showing off just how affordable life can be, with potential most people miss and a quiet sort of comeback happening in the background. If you saw Cairo and wondered what happens when a town loses its people, East Liverpool flips the script. It's what happens when an old river town quietly decides to reinvent itself. And then there's the next place, which takes all of this even further. Here, creative incentives, tiny homes, and mutual aid groups push rent down to almost nothing. Stick around for that. Number 3, Paducah, Kentucky. Tucked along the Ohio River, this small city has quietly become one of the best spots for affordable living in the country. People know it for its rich history, a thriving art scene, and a riverfront that actually feels alive. But here's what really sets it apart. Rent is unbelievably low. You can find a decent apartment or a small house for $400 to $600 a month. Even fixed-up historic homes often go for less than $800. Compared to cities nearby, that's a steal. But Paducah isn't just about cheap rent. The place buzzes with artists, retirees, and remote workers, especially in its lower town district. Cafes, art galleries, and the Riverwalk have brought energy back to streets that once felt empty. For families, there are good schools, small parks, and a downtown you can actually walk. All of it costs a fraction of what you'd pay in a big city. Retirees get peace by the river, and remote workers have fast internet and stable, affordable places to live. Of course, there's a trade-off. Fewer jobs than you'd find in a big metro, especially in tech or corporate work. Some neighborhoods have older buildings or slower city services. Nightlife isn't exactly hopping, but if you care about saving money and actually enjoying your life, those are small sacrifices. Lower rent means you can save, invest, or maybe even live rent-free through local nonprofit or senior housing programs. Art and culture programs have brought in co-pays and community projects, turning neighborhoods into places where people look out for each other, keep up their homes, and throw events together. Honestly, there's a sense of community here you just don't get in a packed city. And your monthly bills stay shockingly low. Paducah stands as a river town that's come back to life. Rent is down, but people haven't left. Instead, they're quietly transforming the place. It's a mix of history, affordability, and real small-town energy. If you're sick of rent eating up your budget, Paducah proves something important. You don't need a big city to find opportunity, culture, or a full, satisfying life. You just have to know where to look. Here comes the real twist. Paducah's got plenty of old-school charm and bargain prices, but the next river town, it pushes things even further. Rent there is almost laughably cheap, but only if you're up for the true trade-offs that come with living way off the mainstream map. Number 4, Madison, Indiana. You'll find it along the Ohio River, tucked under limestone cliffs that just tower over everything. The place feels like time forgot it. Not in a tragic abandoned way, more like someone hit pause in the 1800s and just left it. Back then, Madison was a big deal. One of the biggest steamboat ports around. The docks were busy, merchants did well, money piled up, people built grand houses, brick storefronts, whole neighborhoods meant to last. Then the railroads arrived and just skipped Madison. Trade shifted, factories left, growth stalled. But here's what's wild: Madison didn't crumble. It just stopped, perfectly preserved. Today, it's one of the best examples of a 19th century town you'll find anywhere. Walk the neighborhoods and it's like stepping into a living museum. Tree-lined streets, old homes, blocks you can actually walk, and river views that almost feel European. And the rent still weirdly low. Madison never turned into a metropolis. It's not a hot spot for people looking to relocate, so demand stayed flat and rents never really took off. You'll find apartments and little houses for way less than the national average sometimes, in gorgeous old buildings that would cost a fortune anywhere else. The numbers barely make sense for the quality of life you get. That's Madison's secret. You get beauty, community, and walkability, all without the price tag that usually follows. People here get river walks, arts festivals, indie shops, and a community that actually knows each other. It's got culture, but the quiet kind: no buzz, no trends, nothing driving up prices. Surrounded by bluffs and rolling hills, Madison offers something you just don't see in most affordable places: actual beauty that doesn't cost extra. But let's be honest, there are always trade-offs. Madison moves at its own pace. Local jobs are limited, the nightlife is nothing to write home about, and the town is in no hurry to grow. For retirees, remote workers, artists, or anyone sick of rising rents, though, those aren't drawbacks, they're selling points. Less noise, less competition, almost no pressure on housing, and since Madison never boomed, there was no wave of people getting priced out, no rental chaos. The town kept its scale, its dignity. So what's the takeaway? You don't need a disaster for rent to stay low. Sometimes a town just needs to be left alone, missed by the railroad, skipped by developers, ignored by hype. That's what protected Madison, both in affordability and in spirit. But things are about to change. The next towns aren't just sitting still. They're reinventing themselves, rolling out incentives, land deals, and living setups that make cheap rent look almost old-fashioned. It's about to get way more interesting. Madison shows you what happens when time just stops. Then you get to the next town, and you see what happens when a community decides to rewrite the rules. Stick with me. 5. Wheeling, West Virginia. It sits right on the Ohio River, and honestly used to be a big deal. For a while, Wheeling was the first capital of West Virginia. Industry, steel, glass, river, trade, those things made the place boom. Huge buildings, grand old bridges, theaters, warehouses, stuff you'd expect in a much bigger city. But then industry left. Steel dried up, manufacturing faded, people packed up, and housing demand fell off a cliff. But here's the thing: Wheeling didn't empty out. Not completely. What's left is rare. In 2026, big city bones with small town rent? Seriously, you can still find an apartment or house for $400, maybe $700 a month. Sometimes you'll even get a spot in a historic building, with river views or a peek at the skyline. In other cities, these would be luxury pads. In Wheeling, they're just there. That's what makes Wheeling stand out. You get walkable neighborhoods, historic districts, hospitals, colleges, theaters, the real city stuff without the painful rent. And the community's hanging on: artists, students, retirees, remote workers. They've quietly started fixing up old apartments, reopening shops, local groups, mutual aid, all sorts of initiatives are filling the holes industry left behind. But let's be real about the trade-offs. Wheeling still carries scars from the old collapse. Some neighborhoods make it. Obvious jobs are tough to find, unless you're remote or in healthcare or teaching. But here's the trade. With rent that low, your risk drops way down. You don't need a huge paycheck just to stay afloat. You're not fighting inflation every month. You can actually slow down and live on purpose. That's why more people are quietly drifting in from big cities. Not because it's trendy, but because it works, it's affordable, it's manageable, it feels human. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. The American housing crisis isn't everywhere. In places like Wheeling, the crisis already passed through and left behind these weird little pockets of opportunity. Wheeling sits right in that in-between space past decline, not quite rediscovered. Rent stays low, life's decent, and the big city pressure hasn't landed yet. But the next town? It's a whole different story. 6 Natchez, Mississippi. Up high over the Mississippi River, it's like stepping into a postcard. Giant antebellum homes, shady streets, river views that go on forever. Once upon a time, Natchez was one of the richest places in the country. Cotton River trade, business money poured in, mansions went up, culture thrived, the town felt untouchable. Then history shifted, trade moved, industry faded, people left, and, sure enough, housing demand dried up again. But unlike a lot of places, Natchez never lost its looks. What disappeared was the pressure. That's why, in 2026, Natchez has something you don't see: much gorgeous surroundings and shockingly low rent. You can rent a place here for way less than the national average. Sometimes you're living in a neighborhood surrounded by stunning architecture that would cost a fortune anywhere else. In Natchez, the beauty stuck around, but the prices didn't, and here's the secret most people don't catch. Natchez isn't just clinging to the past, it's alive, in a way a lot of bigger cities lost years ago. You'll find artists with paint on their hands, retirees swapping stories in old cafes, tour guides who know every brick downtown, and neighbors who've watched out for each other forever. Everything moves slow here, sometimes painfully slow. But honestly, that's the point. Low rent means you can actually breathe. You wake up without that weight pressing down on you. And when you get some breathing room, life just feels different. Let's not sugarcoat it, there are trade-offs. Jobs are few, the economy's small, and if you wander around in the off-season, the quiet can feel heavy. Still, for retirees, remote workers, artists, or anyone on a tight budget, Natchez makes sense. You trade speed for stability. Rent doesn't chew up your paycheck, so you don't need to hustle non-stop. Here's the thing, people always link low prices to decline. But Natchez proves that's not always true. Sometimes, a place is just overlooked. The town didn't fall apart, it just stopped trying to keep up. And stepping out of that race saved its charm and made it easier for regular people to stick around. Now, let's head north. Brownsville, Pennsylvania. This place hugs the Monongahela River, and honestly, a lot of people get it wrong. Once, it was a booming shipbuilding spot. Steel, foundries, barges. Brownsville helped build the Northeast. Then the steel jobs vanished. Plants shuttered, barges docked for good, and people moved on. The need for houses didn't just drop, it disappeared. Now, you can buy a house here for less than you'd pay for a used car. Whole blocks sit empty, some owners desperate just to give places away. It sounds made up, but it's the reality of post-industrial America. But here's what most folks miss. Brownsville isn't empty. There are pockets of grit, families hanging on to their houses, church groups, old-timers who refuse to leave, neighbors who help each other out when nobody else will. If you're scraping by or your income's unpredictable, you can survive here. Rent is so low, sometimes it's just about keeping a roof over your head. People fix up old houses themselves, split the bills, or pay just enough to keep the lights on. This is affordability, stripped down to the bone. Of course, there's a flip side. The roads and pipes are old, good jobs are rare. Public services can feel stretched thin. Brownsville isn't easy, but if you're looking to slash your expenses to the bare minimum, this is about as far as it goes. When rent almost disappears, everything changes. You don't need a big paycheck. You don't need to chase after inflation. What you really get here is time, and that might be the most valuable thing of all. Brownsville shows what happens when housing gets so cheap the market sort of breaks. It forces you to ask, what if staying put costs less than leaving? Now let's move to Danville, Virginia. It's not some forgotten ghost town. It's a small city where rent won't swallow you whole like it does in the big metros. Tucked near the North Carolina line, right along the Dan River, Danville used to run on tobacco and textile mills. Over the years, a lot of big employers packed up and left Danville. When that happened, housing demand shrank. But here's the thing, the city didn't just empty out. Instead, it got more affordable. Rents in Danville now sit well below the national average. We're talking about $950 to $1,150 a month for most places, depending on the size and type of unit. That's roughly 40 to 42% less than what you'd pay in similar spots across the country. One-bedroom apartments usually run between $900 and $1,100. If you want a two-bedroom, you're looking at $900 to $1,200. Modest three-bedroom homes. Those often go for $1,200 to $1,400. And what really stands out is the fact that Danville still has plenty of housing to choose from. You're not stuck fighting off a dozen other renters for a single place. You actually have options. That puts Danville among the most affordable small cities in the area, especially for its size. It doesn't feel like Brownsville, where things fell apart, or like Madison, which seems stuck in the past. Danville's got real perks. The city isn't just affordable, it's got a lively river district. Restaurants, coffee shops, weekend markets, historic neighborhoods you can actually walk in, parks and trails, open riverfront spots, local theaters, science centers, community events, several hospitals, and solid health care. So Danville isn't just cheap, it's a place people actually want to live. Whether you're retired, working remotely, or living on a fixed income, that mix reasonable rent plus good infrastructure is hard to find. Of course, let's not sugarcoat it. Rent's low, housing is 10 to 20% below national averages. But Danville isn't perfect. Jobs are fewer than you'll find in a big city. High-paying fields like tech or finance barely show up here. Most opportunities cluster around healthcare, education, or local services. Some parts of town, especially outside the revived downtown, feel a little worn out compared to shiny metro suburbs. And even though the river district's bouncing back, a few neighborhoods are still catching up after the old industries faded. The rental market is smaller, less competition, sure, but not as many choices as you'd get in a major city. Still, for a lot of people, it's a fair trade. Rent stays affordable, and life feels pretty good. Why didn't Danville's rent shoot up like in other cities? A few reasons. Fewer people moved in once the jobs left, so the housing rush never happened. The city didn't explode in population like some places. Instead, Danville focused on making itself more livably, investing in culture, saving old buildings, opening up the riverfront without sending prices through the roof. The overall cost of living, especially for housing and utilities, stayed lower than average. Put all that together, and Danville managed to keep rents stable while other cities saw crazy spikes. Now, look at Alton, Illinois, just north of St. Louis, right on the Mississippi. Alton has its own take on affordability. The town never emptied out or turned into a ghost city, it just got overlooked. Back in the day, Alton thrived on river shipping and industry. Steel, glass, manufacturing, and commerce built a strong middle class. Neighborhoods grew, downtown buzzed, and for a while, it seemed like things would always be that way. But then industry slowed down, jobs drifted toward bigger cities, and a lot of people moved closer to St. Louis. What stuck around? Housing, tons of it. That's why, in 2026, Alton feels like a rare find. While rents shot up everywhere else, Alton stayed put. You can still grab an apartment or a little house for way less than the national average. Picture old brick buildings, historic homes, neighborhoods by the river that give you that leafy, tucked-away vibe without the price tag you'd expect. And don't think it's one of those ghost towns either. Alton's got schools, hospitals, restaurants, trails, local shops, festivals, and real neighborhoods where people stick around for years. You get affordable living, but you're not cut off from the world. Folks walk the streets, watch the river, and you're just a short drive from St. Louis without those St. Louis rents. For commuters, retirees, remote workers, families, Alton is a smart middle ground. Cheap housing, but still close to real opportunities. Of course, you trade some things. Alton's still shaking off its industrial past. Some spots need fresh investment, and a lot of places are showing their age. Growth isn't fast. This isn't a boom town, but honestly, that's exactly why rent hasn't gone through the roof. That slow pace runs through this whole list. When a town stops chasing the future, when demand cools off, rent finally calms down. Alton proves something. Affordable American living didn't vanish. It just slid off the main highway. 10 Vicksburg, Mississippi. Vicksburg doesn't feel abandoned. It feels like time hit pause. It's perched way up over the Mississippi River on steep bluffs. And once, it was a powerhouse. In the Civil War, whoever held Vicksburg owned the river. For a moment, Vicksburg held history in its hands. Then, history moved on. Now, it's a quiet southern river town with big city bones. Giant streets, grand old antebellum houses, brick buildings built for a commerce boom that never came back. That's where the odd mix of opportunity and tension starts. Let's get specific. In Vicksburg, single-family homes go for $60,000 to $120,000. Not shacks, not trailers, actual houses, with porches, yards, cool details you couldn't touch anywhere else along the river. Rents tell the same story. One-bedrooms usually run $450 to $650. Two bedrooms, $600 to $850. Even historic homes chopped into rentals stay well under $1,000 a month. For a river city with this much history, those numbers almost feel fake, but they're real, and here's why. Vicksburg lost the economic race. Manufacturing left. The railroads faded. Tourism never grew past a few busy weekends. What's left is a town anchored by government gigs, healthcare, small businesses, retirees, and families who never packed up. No boom, no buzz, just a mix of stability and a little bit of stuck. And yet Vicksburg still works. There's a walkable downtown, river views that look like movie sets at sunset, and local diners that haven't changed in 40 years because, honestly, there was never any reason to. The Vicksburg National Military Park keeps drawing people in, year after year, but not so many that housing prices skyrocket or the town gets swept up in gentrification. This isn't a place trying to reinvent itself. It's holding on, living off memory. Really, let's be honest. There are trade-offs. Jobs are scarce, and pay isn't great. Healthcare's here, but if you need a specialist, you'll probably be driving out of town. Forget nightlife or trendy spots, fast-moving careers? Not really. If you're used to a city that never stops, Vicksburg's pace might feel painfully slow. But for some folks, that's exactly what makes it appealing. This is a town for retirees who need their dollars to stretch, for remote workers who aren't tied to the local job scene, for people running from sky-high rents, not running after some new status symbol. Here you can buy space, soak up history, and enjoy some peace and quiet without drowning in debt. Vicksburg doesn't try to sell you some glossy dream. It just offers room to breathe. And honestly, that's the real story. As we wrap up, all 10 of these river towns follow the same quiet pattern. The housing crisis. It's not everywhere. It hits the crowded, the hyped up, the overheated, but it leaves the overlooked alone. America's story isn't just about cities that boomed and grabbed the headlines. It's written out here too, in these river towns that once powered the country, shipped its goods, built its fortunes, and, when the current changed, they didn't vanish. They just learned how to live with a little less attention. And right now, the world is sending that message loud and clear. That you'll never own a home or escape high rent. But these 10 towns prove that's a lie. If you're ready to stop paying for someone else's mortgage and start building your own future, hit that subscribe button right now. I'm hunting for these glitches in the economy every day, so you don't have to. Don't forget to smash the like button if this video gave you a bit of hope today. It tells the algorithm that people actually want to see affordable solutions. Check out the next video on the screen to keep the momentum going. I'll see you in the next one.